Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
Hi, it's David Grice and Troy Simcock. Once again, we are talking innovation, and being a Tuesday, we have got an innovator for you like no other on the show thus far.
Yeah, absolutely, and really looking forward to hearing the story from Emma Hack. Now, you may not know her name, but you'd certainly know her work. She's a self-made artist, and she's painting bodies, she's doing photography, she's got a gallery, and I can't wait to hear her story.
Yeah, she probably is best known for Goyte's film clip, Somebody That I Used to Know, where she painted Goyte and Kimbra, and that thing would have just catapulted her worldwide. All of a sudden, people went from knowing her locally to internationally.
Can you just imagine the experience for her to actually have worked on something like that?
Yeah, well, let's find out about that. We spoke to Emma and asked whether her entrepreneurial journey actually began with the body painting coming first.
Well, yeah, actually it did.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I started off as face painting when I was, young at school and just earning extra pocket money on the weekend, and I'd seen some advertising for the musical Cats and realised that that's sort of what I really wanted to do. And then, I just started painting my sister, her face and stuff like that, and then face painted for a few years and... yeah, just to survive, I guess, in my teens, as well as working at Pizza Hut, as you do. Mm-hmm. And then, studied makeup artistry, and that's when my teacher said, hey, look, what you're doing on the face is beautiful. You could do that all over. Why don't you? So I was always pretty shy with my own body, so I found it, kind of confronting to do it, but also I love the whole idea that you could change the shape of somebody with, I guess, the illusion of body art.
Mm. And so at the time, that you decided to really step into it, in further study, did you realise how good you were at that point, or did it take others recognising it in you?
Yes, I did realise I was good at it. I had a gift, but there was no means to use it, I guess back then, I live in the city of churches here in Adelaide, and, I was a weirdo painting nude people. So, it's sort of one of those things. But then I sort of got into the club scene around the same time and started doing promotions at nightclubs, and then started building, my body painting into the dance shows and performances and parades and stuff there. And then, it was always Emma Hack Presents. And so, that audience is now of a mature age buying art. So it's actually turned out to my advantage. But I guess I sort of fly by the seat of my pants with everything I do, and, I just sort of wandered along. But it was frustrating in the beginning. And it was also, there was no reference of it. There were no books on body art. It was very... I guess the contemporary style of body art that I do, obviously it goes back Indigenous years. It's one of the first art forms in the world when you think about it. But for me, I didn't know that there was anybody else doing it until the web, interweb started. So, and that's when I realised there were other people, and I sort of connected with them and started getting jobs overseas, and it started rolling.
So you're clearly pioneering in this area, really. And did you think from the start, when you first did your first piece, that it would ever go to the extent that it has?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have extremely pie-in-the-sky ideas, and a lot of people thought I was nuts and crazy and, how could I make a career out of it? But I think if you put your mind to anything, and also, there's a lot of painters out there. So you're competing with all these painters. But if you're doing something that's fresh and new, maybe it might take you 10 to 15 years to get to the point where your work is appreciated, but you're way ahead of the rest of them that might have started even 5 years ago. So, it's become very popular in the last, I would say 10 years, probably since 2005, 2006. It's when my work dropped off overseas. And before that, I was travelling everywhere. But Mac Makeup actually bought out a body paint and then trained all their staff. And so therefore, everybody around the world was painting of some sort. And it was a lot cheaper than hiring a chick from Adelaide in Australia to go all the way to Dubai or, Canada or wherever we were going. So, that work dropped off pretty swiftly. But back then, that's when it sort of became, popular.
What came up for you when you realised that was occurring around you? Because, particularly as a pioneer, here you are, thinking you were the only person doing it, then discovering there were a few others around the world. And by virtue of what you guys have created has become a much bigger thing, and now it's sort of being commercialised by other people. Did you see that in any way as, people capitalising on something that you'd created?
Look, for me, like there's other artists that were before me as well. So there's Verushka, who is late 60s, early 70s, used to paint herself into rustic walls and backgrounds. She worked as a performance artist. She was also I guess the first sort of supermodel. It's a very famous photo of her in a safari suit with the big hair, and Herb Rich shot her back in black and white photo. So she sort of started doing what I do now, I guess. And then obviously there's traditional. So I don't think anything is ever new. I think it's the way that you approach something. So for me, I always wanted to blend someone into a background, but I didn't want to do it the way Verushka had done it. So in 2005, the idea had been in my back of my mind, and my husband in particular, Justin, he said to me, you have to do this. And I'm like, don't like the rustic thing, it's not really my bag. And then I saw the wallpapers of Florence Broadhurst, and I started doing that, and that's how sort of, I guess I sort of catapulted myself within the art scene, and started selling on that side, and that sort of took over from the live gig thing and travelling the world. So, everything sort of had this sort of general direction and flow. So, yeah.
And was it this whole reinvention thing? I mean, there's something that comes up for us often is how people have to continually reinvent what they do. And is this something that just sort of happened fairly recently for you, or is this something that you kind of planned that might emerge, or did you just sort of fly with an opportunity?
For me, also living in Adelaide, a hair and makeup artist, working in advertising and stuff like that. So here in Adelaide, you do everything. If you're in Sydney, there's a makeup person, there's a hair person, there's a stylist. But for here in Adelaide, I was doing styling, hair, makeup, set build, everything. And for me, I've always had my hand in many pies to survive here. So it's just sort of what sort of took off. But the background has always been the art, and that's what's been important to me. Mm. And the rest of it has fueled that, though. Everything that I've learned from working within the advertising industry has helped me with the direction now that I take my business in, how I think about what I do. And then, of course, all the hair and makeup that I was doing, it refines what I do. So when you look at body artists, there's body artists that come from a hair and makeup background, and then there's body artists that come from an art background. I sort of come from both. So it's interesting to sort of see, you can really pick the difference, the finished quality of work from a hair and makeup artist, but they may not be as able to paint. So yeah, it's a funny thing, but there are some really gifted people out there now, and to be honest, much more gifted than I am, but I feel that I've really hit my niche at the right time, and it's be hard to catch up to that.
You mentioned early that some of the early adopters of what you were doing were people that were working within music. Is that where you first found those that were willing to have their entire bodies painted?
I was just painting my friends. Yeah, I think, and I guess, working in the, advertising modelling industry, there's models and stuff that were, I remember a modelling agency refusing to give me models, saying that, I can't believe what you're doing, body painting, you're not body painting my models. So I guess, crashing through those barriers is, a main thing. And I guess the music industry, I worked with the Audreys quite a bit on their first few albums, and body painted Tash as well for one of their songs as well, which was a stop animation piece actually before the Goyte. So if you're keen to sort of find that, we could Google that. Mm-hmm. And then when the Goyte thing came out, that was really, I guess that idea I've had for ages, because I sort of worked at Anifex here, which is the animation studio here in Adelaide, and I'd created work for them before, on set, but not animation, and I always was fascinated by it. So when Natasha Pincus, who's the director and producer of the Goyte video clip, she contacted me. She said, I've got this idea to blend, somebody into a wall with stop motion. And I was like, excellent, that's an idea I've had, but it needs to be done properly. Who is the artist, And at that time, Wally wasn't as well known. And I think 2 years prior, he had a song called Your Heart's a Mess come out. Mm-hmm. And I Googled him, and I found that song, and I thought, oh, that's the guy who sung that song, and his voice is so amazing. I said, yeah, okay. And so that's how it all happened.
Wow. And what did that mean for you? I mean, that song was number one all over the world.
Yeah, it was really surreal. Actually, to be really quite honest with you, it was a really difficult shoot. It was 23 hours straight, a very emotional thing to do, and I couldn't watch it for quite some time, probably almost up to a year, and really not feel what I felt on that day. Mm-hmm. And it's not because of who was there. Everybody was great, and, but it was an extremely difficult shoot to do. And, there were times where I couldn't even read what, direction I was going in, especially with Kimbra's back, because that came down on a horizontal, but it had to be applied up on all these sort of angles, and you couldn't put a pinpoint of where where was that straight line you were going to, but I also couldn't see what was behind her at that time either. So, like, yeah, it was an incredibly difficult shoot. So, yeah, I didn't enjoy it as much until, as I said, you know, I was just saying before, you know, like I came into the studio now and just heard the song on the radio and actually felt like singing it. That's a good 6 years to get over it. It's maybe childbirth or something. You know?
So perhaps just explain to us a little bit about the process that you go through when you do paint somebody and just about those difficulties. You talked about not being able to see the background and those sorts of things. Just maybe could you share with us a little bit about how you do it?
The way I set up my work is I either paint a background or the wallpaper I've used in the past is Florence Broadhurst, is an iconic Australian wallpaper designer. I hang the background and I set up my camera and that's my viewpoint. So perspective is everywhere, just straight through the camera. So my model will stand in position and I'll sort of line up the background with how I want it to relate to her. And if I painted the background, I have an idea of where the body's going to sit within the work. And then, yeah, I look through camera, I run over and paint a line. Usually I start on top of the shoulders and then I run back and I make sure it lines up and then I keep on going backwards and forwards. I probably do it the hardest way possible. I'm sure that you can project or have a screen set up on your side. Usually if I did like major commercial work, I'd do that. But to be honest, when I'm creating, I like it to be really organic, and especially if I was creating her work, I found like I wanted to have a bit of Emma in it. So there was a little bit of freedom and push in the actual work that was on the body. So it wasn't just so structured and regimented to Florence. And I guess towards the end especially, that was a frustration for me, is just recreating somebody else's work. So it takes like 8 to 15 hours.
I was going to say, how long does it take?
It's crazy, and the models have to stand there pretty much the whole time. We can break, but the longer you break, the longer it takes.
Yeah.
So, you know, I work with quite similar girls all the time, mainly because it's just easier that way and they know what they're getting themselves into, and some people can really do it and some people really can't. Some people faint and, you know, all those things. And when someone faints, they sweat and then the paint's water-based and you're kind of like retouching everything. So, you know, and it's quite common for someone to pass out because they're sort of trying to hold still so much that their concentration is a lot more than what they ever thought it would be. But yeah, it's, you know, it's an interesting art form to do. And also the other side of it now, as I'm getting older, like I'm 45 now, and I love the fact that my girls are getting older with me and I'm still working on them and they still want to be part of the process. And, you know, the whole ageing philosophy in society now is like something that needs to be embraced a little bit more. So for me to paint an 18-year-old now for one of my artworks doesn't really make any sense unless I'm making a comment on Gen Z or something, you know. So for me, it's important to keep on painting the people that I've painted in the past as well.
And do you go into these shoots with an actual preconceived idea of what you're going to do on the body, or is this something that is part of that creative process that just...
You know, if I went in one day and created something and then I went in the next day and created something, they would never look the same, and I would never want them to look the same, and I would never go back and create again. So whatever you see of my work is the one time I did it. I don't like being stuck. So, or regimented, like, or put into like a box to create. So like I've never probably been very interested in film work, for instance, because continuity is just a nightmare and not enjoyable for me at all, especially with body painting, because I really love the freedom and flow. And I think, you know, there's different energy on different days from different people as well, like what they might want to bring to the shoot as well, depending on how they feel. You know, sometimes they're having a good or bad day, but, you know, you can always draw emotionally on that in the actual artworks when you're directing at the end. So, you know, that kind of thing is interesting.
How do you cope with, you know, all the investment that you've just talked about, and then when there's something hanging in a gallery, someone stands in front of that piece and just makes a judgment then and there?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing also about owning your own gallery, is that you do hear that, and, you know, I go to art fairs and sell my work now as well. But I'm really quite disconnected from my work when I've done it, and I know what I like, and I'm okay if, you know, I think art should offer commentary anyway, to be honest. And I think, you know, I've had someone sort of stand and go, oh, I don't like that piece as much as that piece, you know, but that's okay because everyone has different, you know, I guess, ideas of what their aesthetic, their ultimate aesthetic is. And that's not a huge concern for me at all. Like now I'm sort of probably a bit thick-skinned, but in the back in the day it probably hurt a bit.
Do you have anything that's around you that helps to inspire your creativity as you're doing your art? Like, is there music playing? Is there some inspirational words that you're hearing, or is it just something that you do in silence?
Yeah, no, I'm not an inspirational word kind of person, but I like to, music, I'll tend to start on something that's really just quite calm, because I'm feeling my energy is I'm very anxious in the beginning, because I'm anxious about how the other person's going to deal with it more than me. It's or if I haven't done a design before, it's geometric in some way, which is always the hardest. I've sort of got my own emotional issues with doing that, but I like to push myself, so I throw myself in it anyway. But yeah, so I will listen to something more calm and just sort of chill out, and then you sort of get halfway through and you get that when you're working for so long doing something, you start to get that crazy in your head, and then I just sort of pump the music up a bit, just try and get through that. And then towards the end, like the last hour or so is more important for me to get the model into the right zone, because they're in quite a bit of pain by then, to be quite honest with you. Imagine standing like that amount of time and your back sort of compacts in, and it's just not great. So I just sort of ask them what they want to listen to, and then I sort of talk them through, what I want from them, like, when we're photographing the work, so that we're ready to go. Sort of if they need to be energised, I'll energise them. If they need to be more, relaxed in that process, then I'll speak to them more in a relaxed tone. For me, like if they don't perform, or like I'm stuffed, aren't I, really? So, yeah, that's really important, is the end, I guess, the result, and them feeling good. Not necessarily worrying about myself so much.
Mm-hmm. What about those, when you said you started painting bodies, there was really something there for you in terms of how, bodies were looked at and perceived. Is that still part of your work now? Particularly you're saying that you're quite happy to work with, people as they're ageing as you do.
Yeah.
Are you still sort of feeling that's a motivator in some way?
Yeah, of course. And I'm still in that same zone. Like for me, it's really important that the person feels comfortable in front of me. Yeah, I don't even know really how to explain it, but for number one is for me to make them feel as comfortable as possible. And I also have a male assistant, so, I tend to send him out while I'm starting off, unless it's the same person that I've used before. I do think that the PC in society now has just gone out of control. Like I really feel it, especially within... I get asked to do live gigs and they want like full coverage of the top and full coverage of the bottom, and I can't even work like that, because it looks like you're trying to cover something. It's stupid. But I think the society's almost gone backwards. In the beginning, it was very free, but it was like, what are you doing kind of thing. Whereas now I find that people are very close-minded. Especially, I guess, with what's happening around the world with governments and the really conservative choices that are being made.
So tell us, Emma, about the current work that you have. We've had the pleasure of having a look at some of it online and all that sort of thing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the new work's actually like a really big transition for me. So it's a geometric collection, and I've really wanted to do... I guess I've never really seen myself as a photographer. I've been photographing since 2007, and I almost did it as a means to an end for me to create, just to sort of capture what I'd done. Otherwise the photographer is seen as the artist, and you're just merely, I don't know, chopped liver, I guess. So I started photographing my work, but I haven't ever bought a camera or anything like that. I just hire everything because I don't shoot that often. And for this particular collection, I actually felt like a photographer in a way, and probably many people will say, oh yeah, Emma, don't be so silly, you've been a photographer the whole time. But I guess for me, I've worked with like a really amazing photographers all around the world, and I know how much time and energy they put into their craft, and I sort of felt like I hadn't done that, but I put the time and energy into the other side of my craft. So yeah, the new collection is sort of very sculptural, and it's based on like a very athletic form, which I really like, and I think, it's that's probably a really healthy image to have of the human form. But what I really love is the background's very flat and sort of, straight edge lines, and then you've got this human body that has the same print over the top of it, but because they're contorted or there's a flow to the work, and I find that's really interesting. I had a bit of a hiatus from body painting for a couple of years and went into doing embroidery and ceramics and all these other things, you know, and I think you get to a point in your career where you think you don't want to do it anymore. And I sort of had come to that point where I wasn't enjoying the body art so much, to be quite honest with you, and I felt like I was just doing it because other people wanted me to do it. And so...
How did you go through that and get out the other side now?
I opened a gallery. I opened a gallery in North Adelaide for 2 years. I was just there for over 2 years. And what I did was I made it my studio. So I've never really had a studio before because, as I said, I sort of create like... I create like really quickly. So if I have a deadline, I'll usually work up like really tight to it. I'm the chick that did homework like the night before it had to be in kind of thing. So the same thing sort of applies to everything I do. But it allows me to sort of think about what I'm doing and get to the point where I'm really happy with what I'm doing. Like if I created it too early before the exhibition, I might change my mind and not include it. So this way I have to push myself into doing it. And I'm really manic, and my husband really doesn't like me when I'm going through that phase because it's not easy to live with me. I'm like, it's only 2 weeks of your life putting up with me like this. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, okay. So I opened a gallery, and so I created like a space in which I could create and people could come and watch me create, and therefore it would make me do it. Yeah. So otherwise I'd just sit at home and go, oh no, I can't be bothered stitching today or whatever. Like I'm not the artist that can sit every day and create art. Like for me, it's more in my mind and then produce it. So, and get inspired and then produce it. Not like, I'm not regimented, but a lot of artists are and can sit and do that for hours. And most of them are painterly artists, and it takes, you know, anything up to years to make a piece of artwork. So those people, you know, they have to be like that. So, and I created a few like really cool collections, you know, with stitching, and I love the embroidery. Like there's some really beautiful pieces. But at the time, and then I hurt my shoulder. I got an embroidery injury from like 15-hour days of embroidery. And I started thinking, you know, like maybe it is easy to go back to body painting. It's such an easy thing. It comes so naturally to me. So I feel like, you know, I learnt that really I did have a gift, and maybe I didn't appreciate it as much as what I should have. And now I appreciate it again. And I guess where I'm at now is that I sort of am realistic about where I'm at. So I'll create a couple of collections a year, and then by moving out of the gallery, I've been doing a bit of community service and things like that in that space, and sort of giving back to sort of, I guess, the area and things like that. And I really felt like I wanted to move that forward, but I was burning out doing it and trying to work out how the best way of doing that is. So I've been running an art prize for 4 years, and so I've put together a collective with all my art prize finalists, and now I'm showing them in a gallery space and giving them opportunities to show their art. And to be honest, we've been open for 4 days and we've sold like 12 works already,
Wow,
which is great.
that's incredible.
Yeah, the artists are really happy, and I'm taking them to Hong Kong in March and all these other little things. So by doing that, I guess it becomes a business, but I'm able to help people, and I can still feel the community side. So that's kind of where I am. I'm going back into the gallery thing again, but this time being realistic and really focusing on my collections being really, really strong body artwork and things that haven't been done before is ultimate for me. Like I always want to be sort of first at trying something. Like, I don't know if you remember the crash car motor accident commission.
Yes.
So the body sculpture of 17 people painted as a car, and then that's sort of become a very big worldwide body art thing. Like there's this amazing guy over in Italy called Johannes Stodder, and he's now, you know, really taken that and, you know, the contortion of bodies and making animals and things like that. And, you know, he's become quite famous from doing it, which is really great. So there's movements that are happening from things that I have maybe triggered ideas with what I've done. No one's ever done the Goyte thing, though, again. Like, stop motion body art, obviously, is like a bit of a nightmare.
Definitely.
So, yeah, that's kind of funny. But it is nice, I think, and I'm not interested in doing, you know, the sculptured body art thing. It's like, that was nuts, you know. Like, I feel like I did it really well. I was asked to do it again for a really big campaign, but I wasn't incredibly happy with, I didn't think the result would look as good, so there's no point in me doing it again. So I guess, you know, where I am in my art career is that I make the choices of whether I decide to work with a company or do something or not, and not just take it for the money, because, yeah, if you're not moving forward, I don't want to move backwards. So I think that's really a good thing to do.
A really hard decision at times when, you know, you're, you know, living in the art world and, you know, you don't necessarily have that, you know, weekly wage like everyone else has in other jobs. So to to say no to something and know that you might not know what's on the other side of it. You'd have to really back yourself in.
Yeah, 2009, 2010, that really happened. Like, it was, honestly, it was a 10 double-page spread in Harper's Bazaar for Fendi. And it was like, it would have launched my career. So the Goyte thing was like my sort of reconciliation for what happened with this situation. And they said, oh, you know, we've got these handbags. And around the time, I think Louis Vuitton were doing, you know, the sort of the Japanese designers' work with all the cute characters and stuff. And I thought, oh, they're doing something like that. That'd be kind of cool to paint someone into a background, la, la, la. And I jumped online. And the deal was done, like it was well paid, the whole works, you know, like it was the launch of me to luxury, you know, land. And I looked online to sort of see what the up-and-coming, and it was all snake and crocodile skin bags, you know. And I have live animals in my works, like they'd seen the crocodile, obviously, which is Florence Broadhurst wallpaper with the girl holding a crop. And I just said to them, I'm like, you know, I can't promote like this product. And they're like, don't you know who we are? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm really, like, I've been crying for 24 hours before I made this phone call to you. But they were absolutely furious. And I got really black banned actually after that. There was a couple of other jobs that I got offered for, and they went, you know, to the directors for whatever reason. It was like in Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is a pretty small place doing events and things like that. And they just were like, nah. And people would come back to me going, what have you done, you know? Mm-hmm. So that really, it was quite daunting to do that, but I think it was the right thing to do, and I don't think I'd be where I am in art now if I had done that. Like maybe I'd be rich living in, you know, some fabulous country, or who knows, but I'm pretty happy with the decisions I've made, and like even if they've been that hard, I think they're worthwhile making.
Magnificent, Emma. Thanks so much for joining us on the In Show. It's been great to hear about the evolution of your journey. Now, people, if they want to check out your art, where do they need to go?
They can go to emmahackgallery.com. They can also join my Facebook, and there's Art Bar Adelaide, which is my new business, I guess. So it's a gallery and a bar, which is always fun. Sip on some wine and have a look at some art. And then, you know, I'll be travelling to, if you're hearing this in Hong Kong, I'll be over for the Asia Contemporary Art Fair in March. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And for more in innovation, you can check out theinshow.online, subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes, rate us 5 stars if you like what you're hearing, and we are on Facebook and Twitter as well.
We certainly are, Troy, and that's growing and growing and growing. On tomorrow's podcast, Troy, we've got another innovator who's coming in to share with us what's in for them.
We'll catch you then.
The In Show Interview, brought to you by Adelaide Smart City Studio. Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.